Welcome back at the Red Bull Ring here in Austria for the second race of the BMW M2 Cup Benelux, just as the cars come into view and are ready for the start of race number 2. We have got Senna van Seulen on pole, and alongside him Lorenzo van Riet, the two drivers that fight it out, or they fought actually for the victory in race number 1. And we are racing here in Austria for the BMW M2 Cup. We are running up to the first corner with Van Seulen in the first place. There was a crash in the opening race, but all is clean. For race number 2, even Jaden Post made it round. He was the one crashing into another driver on the inside. That was Sen Rodenburg, with Rodenburg this time out starting behind in 7th. So the fight for the race lead still on, with Van Riet now leading. There was a little bit of a contact in turn 3 now, sort of midway through the pack, but we have got the first two drivers, just like in the first race, and another touch. Dirk Warmerdam getting hit from behind in turn number 4, and as a result dropping down the order. We have got the 10 cars on the grid for the second race as well. Cars needing a little more space than the track actually offers. Was it 74? No, that's Jaden Post. So Senna van Seulen leading from Lorenzo van Riet. Sandra van der Slot actually in 3rd, doing much better than in the first race. And this is Jaden Post, car number 74. Did have a look on Gianni van der Kratz. He's followed by Job Rapange, the car number 15. So this is a nice trio fighting out from 4th through 5th to 6th place. Look how flat they're all cornering through the right-handers. It's actually a very tricky section of the corners towards the end of the circuit, because you're right on the edge of your tyres, of the adhesion of their tyres, and be careful about the track limit, especially in turns number 1 and 9, which are the main ones where the race stewards check that for you as well. Jaden Post, he had to retire from the first race immediately after the opening lap, after the clash with Sen Rodenburg. Now he's in the race and he's fighting inside the top 5, trying to have a look on Gianni van der Kratz. Closed the door on him, didn't allow him on the inside, which means the Jaden Post still remains back in 5th and has to check his rearview mirrors every so often, just to make sure that Job Rapanch is not really attempting something on his own. Rapanch dancing out of the left-hander, touching the gravel with his right rear wheel and losing a little bit of touch as a result. Through the final corner and onto the next one. Senna van Seulen has completed 3 laps in the lead of the race. We've got one of the BMWs with damage returning to the pits right now. Is that what McAfee probably is? There was a contact further down the field in one of the opening laps. Turn 3 incident noted, turn 4 incident, cars 15 and 11 under investigation. Those are Job Rapanch and Rob McAfee, who is now in the pits. With damage to the front of his car. So are we going to lose one driver in the very beginning of the race once again, just like in race 1? Potentially so, but that damage did not appear that significant, so maybe simply quite some gaffer tape will put all the necessary bits together for the remainder of the race. And of course, the 2 numbers of Rob McAfee, now summoned by the stewards throughout the race to give explanation to what was happening in that corner, probably even provide some footage from the onboard cameras if the teams have them in. Would be surprised if they didn't. Carrying little GoPros. Ooh, and Jaden Post outrated himself into the 3rd corner and dropping down the order behind Job Rapanch, so into 6th. In the meantime, Senna van Seulen still in the lead from Lorenzo van Riet and Sandra van der Slot. Ooh, and that's a very late braking from Jaden Post, which now really elevates him up to 5th and actually also helps Barry van Elk up the order. But that was a kamikaze move, similar now attempted by Job Rapanch, so they are now running side by side, and Rapanch really not wanting to leave any space on the outside. But really look at Jaden Post, he's very aggressive, and he did already go aggressive in the first race into the first corner, caused the crash, had to retire, and even though he was more careful this time out, he really went deep into the corner while attempting a pass on Job Rapanch. And Gianni van der Kratz, car number 53, receiving a warning from the track marshals. Vigorous jump over the inside curb, which unsettled the car and definitely did not allow it to go on throttle as soon as the driver would have hoped for. We are nearing the end of the first 10 minutes of the race, and so far it's pretty exciting. Lots of fights up and down the field. However, Senna van Seulen really not leaving anything up to chances, and he's opened up a lead of 1.3 seconds over Lorenzo van Riet. cars number 53 and 74 under investigation for the turn 1 incident. That's Jaden Post and Gianni van der Kratz. Jaden Post, currently 6th, having lost the battle to Jopra Bunch, who has now gone away. They've already got 1.5 seconds between them. But Post is going to have to defend that from Barry van Elk. Black and white flag for Jaden Post for his driving standards. Yeah, not surprised. He's really aggressive. But that's earning him the final warning from the stewards. Racing standards change. He might get penalized for what he's showing us at the track. Senna van Serlen set 4 fastest times in the first 4 laps as he built the tempo, and so far he's gone to 1:39.6 as his best. And since then it's not been improved by anybody, let alone himself. He's running at 1:40.4, so a significant drop in the pace as everybody's trying to preserve the tyres for the entirety of the race. It's still long. We are only now reaching the end of the first quarter of the race. Red Bull Ring, the track that we're racing on this weekend, 4.3 kilometers in the current guise. And it feels modern when you hear it. It just feels modern, all the infrastructure, everything, compared to some other circuits that we have on the calendar. It's definitely of the highest standards, and that's despite the fact that this is not a new track. It's actually got quite a lot of history to it. It was actually opened on the 26th of July 1969, so 53 years ago already, and soon it's going to be 54 years. So there is quite a lot of history to this place. We'll look at this fight. Job Rapanj taking a fight to the front. Overtaken Gianni van der Kratz for fourth. So he shook off that pressure from Jaden Post and actually started attacking, and he's on his move. And yeah, the race leaders, they do already have a bit of a gap, but the race is still long, still 3/4 of an hour left. So there's still plenty of room for him to climb up the grid even higher and get himself a good result. So back to the Red Bull Ring track. It's called the Red Bull Ring currently because it's of course owned by Red Bull, and it's the home of Red Bull. Everywhere you look at this track, you just see symbols of Red Bull. It's the colors of everything, even the concrete blocks guiding you onto the circuit, all the tire barriers, and of course the bull statue in the middle of the track, and of course at the entrance in that cafe and museum with former Formula One cars on display or other machines that in the motorsports history have had a significant Red Bull backing and sponsorship. So you'll see circuit motorcycles, you'll see old Formula One cars, even lower Formula, etc., etc. There's also a sort of toy track for the Scalextrics models that you can race in the museum. There's a fan shop and lots of other stuff that simply reminds you that you're at home of Red Bull. But it wasn't like that all through the history. As I said, very soon this track is going to be 54 years old. It started life as a track called Österreichring, which in translation basically means literally Austrian circuit, and it hosted the Formula One Grand Prix in 18 consecutive years from 1970 to 1987. And the track used to be much longer, because where you now have the first corner turning sharp right, back then in the 70s and 80s you would simply go ahead and straight ahead and make a much faster, much more sweeping run see above the grandstands on that spot. So you would then rejoin the track at where today's turn 3 now is, which means here the track would rejoin the current circuit and then sort of ribbon down the hill back onto the start and finish straight. But none of the slow corners that we have on the track now used to be here. Those were much faster and much more sweeping. So it was like a roller coaster, sort of baby roller coaster, this track was. And it served for one of the greatest Austrian Grand Prix of the history. Then it was actually rebuilt to the layout that we see today, and and it was used for the Austrian Grand Prix as the A1 ring with a new title sponsorship, and it hosted the Formula 1 Grand Prix from 1997 until 2003. Then the race was discontinued, and so was the track, which actually was on course to be demolished entirely. Even the track itself got ripped off, and there was no racing circuit at this place for some time before well, actually, back then the plans were for the Formula 1 track to grow and for the layout to be extended, for the new grandstands to be built, etc., etc. And those plans actually sort of crashed all the way until 2014. And shortly before that, the track was bought by Red Bull owner Dietrich Mateschitz, who sadly passed away last year, towards the end of last year. And the track was then reopened on the 15th of May 2011. But compared to today, it was still missing the huge grandstand today with all the buildings around it. So it was still pretty basic. I do remember being here somewhere around 2011, 2012 for the World Series by Renault, and still the track infrastructure was much, much simpler than what it is today. And then it was announced that Formula 1 would return for 2014, and the infrastructure was simply beefed up and improved. And since 2014, Formula 1 has been back, and since 2016 even the MotoGP race for the Styrian Grand Prix, Austrian Grand Prix actually. And then there was one more change of the layout last year, because in 2021 there was a scary, scary accident. I can't remember the names of the riders that were involved, but it was in turn 3, that very sharp hairpin on the top of the hill where we are going just now in this race. And two of the riders simply lost it. They crashed together and fell off their bikes, and the bikes kept on traveling towards the corner and actually flew across the track right behind the hairpin. So here, where the drivers are now making a sharp right turn, as they were coming out of the corner, the two motorbikes with the riders no longer on them simply shot across the track, and one of them very nearly missed two other drivers. One of them, I believe, was Valentino Rossi back then. And had the incident happened half a second differently, I mean, sooner or later, the motorbike would have hit a little differently, and that back then could have been a nasty, nasty, nasty crash. Which is why, since then, there is actually a chicane. When there's a big fight now between Job Rapanch and also Gianni van der Kratz. It's not like I didn't notice, it's just I was finishing the history of the Red Bull Ring, and you were already seeing the fight for yourself. And Job Rapanch on the inside, Gianni van der Kratz on the outside. Rapanch now coming through, having bumped wheels with van der Kratz, and also Jaden Post now waiting for his chance. So Rapanch goes up to fourth. We are nearing the halfway mark of the race. And here, this is actually the spot where you'll now probably notice the makings for the chicane that's existed since last year, and that is used for the MotoGP race, simply to slow the bikes right down for this corner to avoid potential accidents just like that one from 2021. There used to be a similar nasty crash in Formula 1 back in 2003 between Nick Heidfeld and Takuma Sato. Takuma Sato, by the way, the Japanese driver, is going to contest the Indy 500 this weekend. And he set the new record of the fastest lap for free practice just recently. Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Pit stop window is now open with 35 minutes left on the clock, so drivers can now come back into the pits. And Gianni van der Krat's doing so also. So is Lorenzo van Riet, who has now entered the pit lane. He lost 6.5 seconds to Senna van Zeulen in the first half of the race. And now him and van der Krat's in the pits. So is Rob McAfee. After the early incident. Dick Van Elk going on in P8. So is, well, actually no, Patrick de Vrede is coming in the pits as well, him being in the gentleman's class. It's the blue car coming into the pits right now, so we've got 3 cars in the pit lane. So that's Lorenzo van Riet out of the pits. Sandra van der Sloot taking second off his hands in the process. Job Rapange jumping up to third. But of course they are still expected in the pits. Into the pit lane go Jaden Post and Barry van Elk for their pit stops. There is Jaden Post. Post is doing the race alone. Be replaced. If you're actually running two drivers, then time to swap. And now also the race leaders are in the pits. That means Senna, Van Zeulen, Barry van Elk already on his out lap, and he's still remaining behind Jaden Post after their respective pit stops.
Hold on. hozzá.
And this is Dick Van Elk. In the pit lane. Halfway mark of the race has now come. We're still waiting for all the pit stops to take effect. Ooh, that was quite an aggressive line through the penultimate corner. Barry Van Elk went all the way across the curb, nearly to the grass. Returning back on the track. Yopra Punch leading still with 1.25 minutes of a gap. Still waiting for that car to come into pace. Senna van Seulen in second from Lorenzo van Riet and Sandra van der Sloot. Nothing changed about that. Also Jade Post up into fourth theoretically, but that's already where Yopra Punch is supposed to come back out of the pits when he completes his visit to the mechanics. So let's just wait for that. Punch is in the pit lane now. Black and white flag for the car number 66. That's Lorenzo van Riet for track limits. Yopra Punch is in the pits. Where is he going to come back out? This is the gentleman fight between Dick Van Elk. De Vrede has now passed Van Elk for P8 overall. It's a bit of jumping over the sausage curb, exiting turn number 3. Now Rogier de Louvre actually swapping and stepping in for Patrick de Vrede in the P8, still ahead of Dick van Elk, and yeah, Senna van Soelen has of course been replaced in the pits by Leighton Furry, and it's also Dirk Warmerdam stepping in for Joop Rapange. And Sven Rodenburg is back in the car number 53. Necessarily the fastest way to go around the first corner. As we are getting near to the two-third distance of the race. So Leighton Furry in the lead from Lorenzo van Riet, Sandra van der Slot, Dirk Warmerdam, Jaden Post, 5th, Barry van Elk in 6th, Sven Rodenburg in 7th, and Rogier de Louvre in 8th from Dick van Elk. The only casualty of the race is so far still being Rodenburg with the early on after one of the clashes with a crumpled bonnet. Black and white flag now comes for the race leader. That's car number 24 for Leighton Furry for track limits. So we need to be careful about that. drive-through penalty for the car number 34, which is Sandra van der Sloot in third place. Her pit stop is actually too short. So Leighton Fourie in the lead from Lorenzo van Riet. They are running 5 seconds from one another. And if we check the times, then Fourie is actually faster than van Riet. That is not promising any fight in any near future. Sandra van der Sloot has just served the drive-through penalty. She's on the outlap with 13.5 seconds. That penalty, so we need to wait and see where she falls. Dirk Warmerdam is now actually getting ahead into P3. Jaden Post up ahead into P4, so this is going to be costly for Sandra van der Sloot. Barry van Elk goes up to 5th, and Sandra van der Sloot emerges out of the pits only in the 6th place. So that's cost her 3 positions. The incorrectly timed pit stop, and that's really bad luck for her, because it didn't seem like an overly short pit stop, so it must have been just a very small breach of the regulations, because Sandra van der Sloot was in 3rd since the beginning of the race. No change for that. Now van der Sloot has fallen to 6th, courtesy of the penalty. And she is 4.5 seconds behind Barry van Elk. And we just need to wait and see for the next lap to be finished for us to assess the pace. Of course, we can check the sector times as well. First sector currently slower. The 2 drivers up ahead, slightly faster than Dirk Warmerdam. 45.0 for Warmerdam, 44.9 for Jaden Post. This lap. We're waiting for more sector times to reveal the truth. There's Jaden Post finishing his lap. 142.0 for Warmerdam, 141.6 for Jaden Post, 142.2 for Van Elk, and 142.0 for van der Sloot. That means that Sandra is not really catching up with the cars ahead. And that means that the crucial penalty is simply going to be costly. it's still pretty undecided between these two. That's Warmerdam and Post. They only have 1 second between them. And that's the closest fight you'll find on the track for the moment. Black and white flag for car number 73. That's Barry van Elk for track limits. Okay, so Dirk Warmerdam with Jaden Post running closely behind one another. Ooh, that was close. Okay. Post outbraked himself a little bit. We know that he's an aggressive driver, and if he gets close, he will attempt something. But at the same time, we know that he's already got a black and white flag warning for his, so to say, driving standards, and that means that he has to behave, otherwise a penalty will come. So 11 minutes left on the clock with Leighton Furry. If nothing terrible happens to him, he's on course for another victory here this weekend. 7.2 seconds ahead of Lorenzo van Riet. This is Barry van Elk. Car number 73 already also received a warning for track limits, and there is still a fight between. Ooh, that was quite a lot of understeer carried into the corner. So Dirk Warmerdam and Jaden Post, that's this fight, the only one still active on the track. Jaden Post less than a second behind Warmerdam, 0.8 across the line. This is your race leader, car number 24, Leighton Furry, who took over from Senna van Seulen. And on to another one, he's already completed 29 laps. Just over 9 minutes still on the clock to be run in this race. And There we are with the guys in third and fourth. This is for the podium. This could still get pretty heated up as they are running up the hill through turn 3. Dirk Warmerdam doing all he can to stay ahead. He's already going a little defensive, choosing his line wisely into the Rauchkurve. That is turn 4. So far, Jaden Post not close enough to attempt an overtaking. And through the right hand as we now go. They're really close to one another, but look how Post is sliding. He's really taken out a lot of his tyres. Well, out of his tyres. Now he's wider again, running across the grass, having a hard time putting it back on the black stuff. And that, of course, means that he's losing touch with Warmerdam. He's now going to miss the apex because the tyres are all dirty. Is not always the faster way forward. And I believe that Warmerdam knows that full well. Windscreen wipers, really. Yeah, the weather is much nicer than it was yesterday. Towards the end of the day yesterday, the skies were getting cloudy, and actually as soon as the racing action stopped, the rain started to fall. First the only light, and then a proper downpour arrived on the track, wiping off any rubber, any grip that there was on the track. So today in the morning we started with a very slippery track, which caught out some of the drivers in the first GT sprint. The second GT sprint is actually coming up right after this race, so right after we finish here we'll be headed back towards the starting grid to do the now usual grid walk, talk to some of the drivers on the grid and actually see the situation right on the track for ourselves. And it appears to me that Jaden Post has actually taken a little too much out of his tyres already. Because he's really struggling for grip now, and all that Dirk Warmerdam needs to do is simply stay calm and drive cleanly. That is now the recipe to keep Jaden Post at bay. Hear the tyre squeal. It's not the faster way around. He's already 1.2 seconds adrift. What is it going to be this time out on the track? 1.4. 1.4. So Dirk Warmerdam getting away from him. means that the race is becoming a little anticlimactic towards the end. We were hoping for a fight between these two, but that is probably not going to come. Either way, it is still Leighton Furry in the car number 24, leading. He's extended that lead to 8.5 seconds. Then Lorenzo van Riet, and further 20 seconds back is this couple, Dirk Warmerdam and Jaden Post. Struggle for grip now pretty much everywhere, and he still sees Dirk Warmerdam, so he still can he can still smell the podium, smell the champagne, but he still sees that in the hands of Dirk Warmerdam. Ooh, this is Dick van Elk. He actually had a couple of spins in the race number 1 in the first corner. Now he's, you know, he's moved it. He's chosen turn 3 to do that exactly. Back with the leader. The car number 24, Leighton Furry, on the final lap. So Leighton Furry leading from Lorenzo van Riet, Dirk Warmerdam, Jaden Post, Barry van Elk, Sandra van der Slot, Sen Rodenburg, Rogier de Louvre and Dick van Elk. It's the second round of the 2023 calendar. From here, the M2s are going to Zolder in Belgium the 7th, 8th and 9th of July, then mid-September to Zandvoort in the Netherlands, then Spa-Francorchamps mid-October, and towards the end of October to Circuit Assen back in the Dutch country. And out of the final tour comes Leighton Furry to make it a victorious double here in the Styrian Mountains at the Red Bull Ring. Leighton Furry brings the car 24 to second victory of the weekend to go undefeated together with Senna van Serlen. Lorenzo van Riet is already across the line as well in second, and we're now waiting for Dirk Warmerdam and Jaden Post. They should appear on the start and finish line any second. There they are. Dirk Warmerdam comes home in third, Jaden Post in fourth from Barry van Elk, and Sandra van der Slot. She was on course to score a podium, however then the penalty came for a mistimed pit stop. Sen Rodenburg in P7 coming across the line about now, and Rogier de Louvre in 8th, with Dick van Elk already seemingly a lap down in P9. Rob McAfee the only casualty of the race after the opening lap incident and damage to his car. So just like in race number 1, 9 cars see the checkered flag, take the checkered flag, come home to finish the race. And that's it for race number 2 of the BMW M2 Cup Benelux. So in just a couple of minutes we'll be back with more action for the second GT sprint, and let's wrap this up with the race highlights.
Egy, kettő, három, 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 egy, kettő, három.